Hello, fictional. Welcome to the What If Issei. Today we are gonna see what if Issei meets with the Kendo girls. Part 4. If you end up liking this video, please consider subscribe, so without further ado, let's get into the video. Inside of the student council office, Murayama took her phone out, deciding to give it one more shot. Katase's sobs had died down for the moment, giving her the personal space to reach into her bag and try calling Issei again. The screen lit up and she clicked on the call icon, immediately seeing his number as the last one dialed. As well as the previous 8 calls. She felt the unease rise up again as she pressed the call button, expecting it to go directly to voicemail. Once she heard it ringing, meaning that it was actually connecting, a surge of emotion came through her. It must have shown on her face, based on the curious gazes from Momo and Reya. Sadness, worry, hope, anger. The emotions pulsed through her too quickly to properly tell which one was being felt at any particular time. As she heard the telltale click of someone answering the phone, the more prominent feeling was anger. How dare he keep them worried about him for hours on end? Hello? She heard Issei say weakly from the other end, and she just about exploded in rage. Murayama stood up from her seat, arm flinging out in rage as she yelled at the boy who had the nerve to make her worry so much. Ice. Where the hell have you been? We've been trying to get a hold of you for hours. As soon as Murayama stood up, Katase cast her tear-stricken gaze to her brunette friend. And her eyes nearly bulged out of her head once she heard her romantic interest's name. I was out with Matsuda and Motohama and forgot to turn my phone on. Did something happen? And now the situation made a little bit more sense to Murayama. Any time that Ice had hung out with his 2 perv buddies, it was like they were off in their own little world of debauchery. A lot of people criticize the new generation for their dependence on cell phones, but those 3 would basically ignore the things when they were together. Well, that and Ice could be quite an airhead when his mind is focused on something. Well, that explains the phone at least. The vice president said something about your link being cut off. We got worried when we couldn't find or get in contact with you. Murayama pinched the bridge of her nose, while the others simply stared at her. The devils in the room could hear what Ice was saying thanks to their enhanced senses. Since Katase couldn't, she was the only one left not knowing the entirety of what was being said. She got the message that Ice was fine, stiffly stood up, wiped the tear stains from her face and marched out the door. So that's what feels different. I appreciate you all being worried for me, but could you please not freak out my mom like that? She hasn't let go of me since I walked in the door. That was an image that made Murayama chuckle. She'd seen what a worried Mrs. Haidu was like once before. After the chairwoman incident, her and Katase had been more aggressive in their daily training. When Issei walked in sporting a few nasty bruises, his mother had dropped dishes she was carrying and sprinted over to him and tried to smother him to death. At the time, Issei had been shocked still. Apparently that was the first time in years she had offered him anything other than admonishments for his ungentlemanly behavior or short and neutral conversation. Her and Katase watched from the doorway with a strange curiosity as Issei started to show tears on the corners of his eyes. When he slowly reached his arms around his mother and tightened, the two started to see the larger picture of who Issei Haidu was. Right, sorry about that. We just thought maybe she knew where you were. And just a heads up, we're coming over, Yui already stormed out. So I hope you're ready. Murayama looked up to see Momo and Reya both looking toward Sona, a silent conversation seemingly being held. When Sona met the gaze of her bishops, she knew what they wanted, to go see Issei. She wanted to see him as well and find out what was causing her to lose the connection through the evil pieces. When she gave a slight nod, the 2 bishops gave a bright smile and packed up their schoolwork. Shit. Mom, I need to hide this. Katase can't see it. Alright Kaori, I'll see you in a bit. Murayama rose and eyebrowed what she heard before the line went dead. What does he need to hide? And from Yui specifically did he remember her birthday? Placing her phone back into her bag, Murayama turned toward Sona, who was placing the paperwork in a file to be dealt with later. Issei went out with his 2 friends from middle school, sounds like he just got home. Sona nodded towards the brunette, a small smile on her face at hearing that her new servant was safe and sound. That smile reversed as she pondered on just why she couldn't feel his presence anymore. She hadn't felt normal since the link was cut. Thank you. We'll be heading over there as well. I need to find out why I can't feel his pieces anymore. Smiles took over the face of the bishops and the Kendo user as they all made their way towards the Haidu household. Finally getting his mother to release him from the death hug, he sprinted around the house, trying to find a spot where he could successfully hide the bag that held Katase's gift. He was a little worried that she wouldn't like it, but jewelry was pretty much out of the question, she wasn't much of a girly girl. So when he caught the smell of perfume that was almost an exact match to what he associated with his pink-haired friend, he felt this small bottle would suffice. His anxiety was rising as the minutes passed. Katase and Murayama had free reign when they came over, so the spots that he could hide the present were almost non-existent. It needed to stay hidden for another few weeks. "Mom, where can I put this so they don't find it?" Issei called out down the hallway to his mother. Mrs. Haidu stepped into the hall, her index finger tapping her bottom lip in contemplation. A figurative light bulb went off above her head. Her head turned towards him as she pointed behind Issei. "In my bedroom closet, there's a wooden chest on the floor with some family heirlooms, it should be safe in there." Issei thought about it for a moment before shaking his head and walking towards his mother. "Could you put it in there then? I don't need to see something that might scar me for life." He raised his hand to give the bag to his mother, who at the moment had a disapproving look on her. One of Mrs. Haidu's hands took the bag, while the other poked her son on the forehead. "And just what does my deviant son think he'll find in there?" But the almost non-existent distance between mother and son, Issei caught the scent of sugar and strawberry. Probably from whatever she had been baking when he came home. "I'd rather never find out just how far the apple falls from the tree," he said with a shake of his head and walked towards the stairs to prepare for the incoming guests. Coming to sit in the living room, Issei's mind was going over his day and the differences he could now feel. Something didn't seem right. After waking up from being turned into a devil dragon, his sense of smell had seemed to be in overdrive. He had been bombarded with smells constantly for the last few days. But not today. He had gone through the day with Matsuda and Motohama just like any other outing he had previously. That may have been a blessing though, going to such a crowded area might have been too much to handle at the moment. But that begged the question, why isn't he picking up scents from a distance anymore? He had only really noticed it when he could smell the sugar and fruit on his mother when she stepped close to him. While lost in thought, Issei didn't see his mother walk back towards the door, nor the multiple voices coming from the entryway. The quiet sound of a crowd of footsteps reached his ears, but didn't bring him back to the world. Is my body still adjusting? Is the sense not being registered by my brain completely yet? His eyes having a 1,000-yard stare, one hand scratched at the back of his head. The new arrivals came into the room unnoticed. Then there was the fact of his two mental residents. They hadn't so much as uttered a word to him all day, which hadn't happened since he became aware of them. Something was definitely wrong here. But that wouldn't explain why I can't feel the link to Kaichu anymore. What's going on? The couch he was on shifted from new weight, his mind was slowly peeling itself out of his own internal pondering when a stinging sensation struck his left ear. Issei quickly shifted his head towards the direction of his pain while grabbing his earlobe with one hand. And was met with the pink eyes of a clearly emotional Yui Katase. The same phrase that ran through his mind when he saw all of the missed calls on his cell phone returned. Uh-oh. Eyes that were still slightly bloodshot from crying, cheeks tinted pink in either unreleased fury or she had smacked her cheeks a few times to collect herself. Katase had an air about her at the moment as her eyes locked onto his, it all but screamed that he needed to make amends for making her worry about him all day. Issei swallowed the nervous lump in his throat when his eye caught movement at the doorway. He had expected to see Murayama and Katase after coming back from his little excursion. Possibly even Sona after the link being cut off had been mentioned. But no, here standing in his living room were 8 of some of the best looking girls he'd ever come across. Katase sitting next to him on the couch, Murayama standing just behind her. Sona was sitting down in the love seat across from him and the rest of her peerage, Tsubaki, Momo, Reya and Tomo, all standing behind her. The brief thought of taking a picture of all of them gathered in his home to use to rub in Matsuda and Motohama's faces crossed his mind. The longer he thought about it, the more he liked the idea. Shifting his eyes over each of his guests, Issei gave what he hoped to be a disarming smile. His left raising in a slight wave, the light in the room caught the bracelet and made it shine for a brief moment. "Evening, ladies." Issei could see Katase and Murayama both scowl at him, not amused in the least. His fellow devils, however, had a look of wariness, Momo and Reya especially. Sona and Tsubaki were the most composed. "If you thought you were getting out of worrying us so easily, you've got another thing coming," Katase scolded, grabbing his attention. Murayama crossed her arms under her chest, nodding in agreement. "Yay, seriously Ice. Is it so hard to turn your phone on? Or you could have just let us know you were going to be out for the day, that way we at least wouldn't have wasted the day." During Murayama's tirade, Sona had gotten up from her seat and walked towards her pawn. Kneeling down in front of him, Katase and Murayama went silent and rose an eyebrow at the violet-eyed devil's action. Sona's hands hesitantly rose and grabbed Issei's left arm by the hand and forearm, carefully making sure not to touch the bracelet. Everyone watched as the Citri heiress's attention was solely on the black and gold jewelry as she took in every detail. "Issei." Her stoic but pitiful, almost cold voice made him feel like he was a toddler caught with his hand in the cookie jar. "Where did you get this?" Suddenly nervous about answering his king, his voice wavered a little. The way she was looking between him and the bracelet, it was like she had just gained some clue to some mystery. It was a gift. My friend and her dad gave it to me years ago, just before they moved. He said it would keep me hidden from the monsters of the world and I should never take it off. I found it in my room this morning. The urge to rub at the back of his head was almost too hard to ignore with the nervous feeling he was getting. So, that's how it happened, Sona whispered, quiet enough that only Issei caught it. The hand she had on his forearm slowly moved to touch the bracelet, the slight shaking in her hand, making it appear as if she were afraid to touch it. Her index finger came into contact with the cool metal, a small almost imperceptible flinch came from the hand, but she didn't pull away. She ran her finger over it, testing the reaction. Then the rest of her fingers, ignoring the confused glances from Issei and the rest of the girls. Sona spun the bracelet around, finding the clasp, and took her other hand that was holding Issei's, and moved both to take the bracelet off. She paused to take a breath in, unsure of what was about to happen. As she unclipped the bracelet, Issei's mother was walking into the room. With her index finger and thumb of her right hand holding onto the bracelet as it slid off of his wrist, a slightly stronger surge of a dragon's presence flooded the room. Sona was somewhat prepared and bit on the inside of her cheek to keep herself in check. The others, however, hadn't known what was going on and thus unprepared for the flood that was released. Having been at a distance the last time this happened, katase and murayama were now up close and personal to the dragon energy Issei was emitting. Their eyes widened, hearts beat just a bit harder and quicker as a warm sensation permeated their bodies. To their normal human senses, it felt like they just sat in a comfortably hot pool of water. And that pool was swirling, trying to pull them closer to Issei. For the devils, it was a much more intimate feeling. It was as if the pinnacle of ecstasy had been raised several-fold. Never had any of them felt anything like it. When Issei had been reincarnated, it was potent. The strength they could feel in his presence was a bit stronger, but the intensity of the effect it had on them was greater than the last time. The only ones to keep their vocal cords from responding were, unsurprisingly, Sona and Tsubaki. But the pink dusted across their faces said that they felt it as well. Sona looked like her head was trying hard to spin from her link being reconnected, the feeling of a powerful undertow coming over her again. The most surprising and worrisome reaction came from the maternal figure of the one that they came to question. Mrs. Haidu had just walked across the threshold to the living room to bring some snacks for the friends of her beloved son. When it felt like her heart had swelled 4 times its normal size. A tingling sensation radiated from her heart to the rest of her body, followed by a loss of coordination and exhaustion. She dropped the tray, falling sideways to the floor, her head smacked against the hardwood floor beneath her. Seeing his mother collapse to the floor only a few feet from him, Issei ignored everything else in front of him and shot out of the couch and nearly sent Sona on her back in surprise. "Mom?" Issei slid on his knees, reaching his mother, and brought her into a half-sitting position, one hand on the back of her head and the other around her waist, the only thing keeping her upright. With her body void of energy and head feeling heavy, Mrs. Haidu looked up with her dazed eyes, catching the worried look her son had. A lazy smile came to her lips as she rubbed the arm of her son that had wrapped around her waist to steady her. "I'm alright, Ice. Just a little tingly, and..." Tired, her sentence trailed off as her eyes slowly closed, her head slumping forward towards her chest. Issei put a hand in front of her mouth, feeling for a breath. Then the hand went to her neck for a pulse. With both seeming to be somewhat normal, Issei gave a breath of relief. "She passed out," Issei said, not turning towards the girls in his house. Katase and murayama were almost as tense as Issei was. Reason being, Mrs. Haidu had been like a perfect mother figure to both of them. She was kind, compassionate, empathetic, and more than willing to listen or help with any issues either of them had. She was the embodiment of what both of them lacked. They each walked over to the mother-son duo, Murayama kneeling next to Issei, rubbing his back to soothe his concern. Katase to ease her own worries of the mother figure unconscious in front of her. "Ice, why don't you bring her up to bed?" Murayama's soft voice called out to him. He heard the words, subconsciously acknowledged them, but they didn't really sink in. Only the thoughts of making sure that the woman that gave birth to him was okay were in his head. He turned his body to the side as his arms caught his mother, one arm just under hers, the other scooped her up beneath the knees. Issei easily picked her up and started walking towards the stairs to place his mother into bed. With Issei out of sight and presumably out of hearing range, it was Murayama that seemed the more upset of the human girls. "What just happened?" Her voice held a colder tone than she had used in a long time. Usually, it was Katase that was the aggressive one. But for someone she considered to be family, all bets were off. Sona had stood and watched in silence as the three had taken care of the older woman. There were no peace offerings to be had here. Nothing that she could say or do that would take away her actions. The humans, or recent humans in their presence, may not have understood what the possible ramifications were of what just happened, but the effects were felt all around. The fact that her pawn's mother had responded in such a way, however. That was odd and definitely something to look into after all was said and done. Sona straightened her posture, locking eyes with Murayama. I apologize for what my actions have caused, however unintentional. To potentially bring a normal human with no supernatural knowledge into harm's way was not my desire. Sona slightly bowed her head down, the most courtesy she felt she could stomach as a purebred high-class devil speaking to a human. I shall say the same to Issei when he returns. My thoughts have not been as clear and focused as they normally are, given today's events. And what I just saw. Well, it does not excuse my actions, it made me lose focus. Sona's response had cooed the Kendo girls a sufficient amount. But it had also raised a spark of curiosity throughout the entire group. They all saw the way that Sona had reacted to Issei's bracelet, heard his explanation of how he got it. But only now were they really thinking that the piece of jewelry may be more than it appeared. And what exactly is it that you saw? Katase murmured quietly, but loud enough for the supernaturally enhanced to easily pick up. Sona shifted her gaze to the pink-haired friend of her curious pawn. Once Issei returns, we'll find out more. Her eyes gazing towards the bracelet in her hand as she spoke. Issei had just laid his mother down into her bed and covered her up with a blanket. The anxiety he felt had fallen a fair amount, enough to gather rational thought. It was only now that he realized that all his senses were back to where they were the day before. But the bedroom door closed, there was only a murmur of the voices from downstairs that his enhanced hearing picked up. His sense of smell had picked up the smell of strawberries, with an undertone of sugar and something else that he found relaxing. He was glad that things seemed to be returning to what was to be his normal state. And that was when his head felt like it would explode. Eyes. Finally. For a teenage boy living in the blooming age of technology, you sure are hard to reach. Partner. How did you shut us out like that? The voices of both Ddraig and Elsha caught him off guard. He hadn't heard them all day, so when they finally spoke up, it felt louder than it normally would. What the hell happened to you two? I tried talking to you, but you ignored me. Issei stated his retorts to them as he tucked his mother in and brushed her long brown locks out of her eyes. There was a brief silence between the three, Issei only waiting for a proper response from either Ddraig or Elsha. He didn't have to wait for long, fortunately. Ice. When we woke up, everything was hazy, only brief images and sounds would come through. It was almost like I was in the process of being awoken for the first time all over again. While Elsha was calm and deliberate with her words. Ddraig was more direct. Partner. I know you're new to this new world you've entered, but what happened today? The Welsh dragon sentence struck a chord of similarity with Issei. Something had changed today that caused all of this. And thinking everything over, there was only one possible cause. The bracelet. He thought, which did nothing to clarify the situation. Issei rechecked his mother's position, hand once more brushing over her forehead. He had no medical training, but it just felt right to feel and see if she had spiked a fever. When she collapsed, he experienced an anxiety like never before. He wasn't entirely sure if it was from his new set of instincts or just the familial love and care he held for her. Whatever it was, all he wanted at that point in time was to make sure that she was safe and healthy. With nothing else he felt he could do for the time being, he stood and started to walk back down to the girls. I think I know what caused it. But I'm not really sure how or why. Issei relayed to Ddraig and Elsha. Humming back down the stairs, Issei saw that all of his guests were seated. Murayama and Katase were on the couch, Momo and Reya had somehow fit in with them. Sona was once again in the love seat, Tsubaki standing behind and slightly to the right. Amo and Yura was sitting cross-legged on the floor on either side of the love seat. The atmosphere felt a little tense, whether the cause from the day in general or the events just prior was unknown. Humming down to the landing, Issei felt all eyes latch themselves onto him. He took a few more steps forward before stopping and set his gaze to Sona. Haichu. I can feel our link again, can you? As the words reached her ears, that pleasant warm sensation came over her again. Reminding her that yes, she could feel her pawn. Outside of the nervous feeling he had, everything seemed fine. Yes Issei, the link has been re-established. Sona adjusted the glasses from falling down too far, crossing one leg over the other. Before anything else, I wish to apologize Issei. I meant no harm to your mother. Issei waved it off, knowing that she didn't mean for anything like that to happen. No worries Kaichu, it was an accident and mom seems to be okay. Thank you. Now that the immediate issue has been resolved, I need to ask. Issei, do you have any idea what this bracelet is? Sona raised a hand holding onto the black and gold links. Issei shook his head. Other than what I said earlier, no. But now I'm guessing it's nothing ordinary, right? But the neutral look still on her face, Sona's eyes shifted over to the bracelet she was holding up. This bracelet is anything but ordinary and the circumstances of it being given to you raises more questions than it gives answers. Sona placed a bracelet down on the armrest of the chair, resuming her explanation. I told you the story between the three factions and the heavenly dragons. But those two were not the only dragons to have come in contact with devils, angels, or fallen angels. But the Citri heiress going into lecture mode as her peerage called it, they all gave her their undivided attention. The tier below the heavenly dragons is the dragon kings who hold power that rivals the leaders of each of the biblical factions. One of these dragon kings is Fafnir, the Gigantus dragon. As Issei intently listened, he could hear Elsha mumble quietly in his head. Ah, yes, that's what feels familiar. Ignoring her comment, he kept listening to Sona. Fafnir is said to be somewhat of a wanderer, collecting treasure and artifacts that catch his fancy. Legend has it that on one of Fafnir's outings, his presence had angered an Old Norse warrior Siegfried. Siegfried was the wielder of the demonic sword Gram and managed to slay Fafnir. For one reason or another, the Norse gods revived him at a later date. The Aodin revived him in exchange for some gold jewelry to get his wife to forgive him for hitting on the Valkyries. Elsha's amused tone caught Issei off guard and almost snorted trying to hold the laughter in. After his revival, Fafnir sought the help of the Norse and angels to create a piece of jewelry from his collection that could conceal his presence in a human form. They crafted a bracelet that would do just that. It was able to completely hide the dragon's presence to appear human. Sona placed the bracelet in her palm, staring at it as she switched gears. Tell me Issei, how often did you wear this after it was given to you? The sudden question caught him off guard, his eyes shifted upwards with a hand on his chin as he thought about it, trying to recall the time after his friend had moved away. Well, I'm pretty sure I almost never took it off for the first year. After that, I'd put it on every once in a while, then lost track of it in middle school. Sona nodded meaningfully. On the couch, Momo's eyes widened as realization struck. So that's how that holy spark got there. All eyes turned towards the bishop, everyone except Sona looked confused, but the king looked a bit put off that a member of her peerage had suspected a holy aspect and failed to inform her. You knew it was there, Momo? Momo turned apologetic, tapping her index fingers together. Sorry Kaichu. I felt it when Ice was reincarnated and thought the holy energy was what caused him all that pain. When Elsha said that wasn't the case, I thought that maybe I was just imagining things. Issei stepped forward with a hand raised. Kaichu, I'm a little confused. What holy spark? Turning from her bishop to her pawn, Sona gave her hypothesis. Because the bracelet was partly created by the angel faction, it was imbued with holy energy. I believe that, because of how long you wore it, that holy energy was absorbed into your body. When I tested your magic the other day, I saw it, but had no explanation as to why or how it was there. Issei scratched the back of his head with a confused look. Shouldn't that hurt me, since I'm a devil? Sona shook her head. If either energies had been forced into you, then they very well may have clashed and hurt you. But your soul welcomed each of them willingly. A brief silence overtook them before Tsubaki spoke. Aichu, does this mean he will be able to harness that holy energy? I'm honestly not sure. The energy was solely for the purpose of protection and concealment, and it is an extremely small amount, therefore I believe harnessing it is unlikely. If anything, it may give him a slight tolerance towards holy objects. Issei stood next to the couch, taking in all the information, but had one burning question remaining. Aichu, why did my mom react like that when you took off the bracelet? There was a notable uncomfortable feeling through a few of the devil girls, only Momo squirmed a bit in her seat, while Sona and Tsubaki remained the same. That was the result of your dragon energy inside of you being suppressed and then released all at once. Sona stated, switching which leg was crossed over the other and entering lecture mode once again. Dragons have a unique trait to them that draws others, specifically from the opposite sex. The effect is felt more from those of supernatural origin due to our enhanced senses. Humans are able to feel it if the energy is strong enough, such as the release of when the bracelet was taken off. However, your mother's reaction could have been affected based on other factors. Sona took a moment to form the right words in her mind, the next part of her conversation could take a turn for the extremely uncomfortable very quickly. The feeling one experiences from being exposed to that energy is affected by how they feel towards the source. Think of it like a dam in a river that lets a small trickle flow through while in place. If the dam were to break, the flood of energy could have any number of responses. The other possibility is if your mother possesses a dragon tamer's trait, very little is known about the specifics of it. But it has been noted that those with it are more in tune with a dragon's energy. Issei mulled over the information given. There was a brief moment where his mind slipped into old habits. Hades and Murayama watched as Issei's face gained an unmistakably lecherous look, one that they knew all too well. Wait. So I can be like a supernatural babe magnet, that's awesome. I'm definitely going to work on using that trick, heh. But Elsha was quick to rein him in. Ice dear, women are good on picking up the intentions of men, it wouldn't work the way you're thinking if they suspected you're only trying to seduce them. What she's saying is that lust and love amplify the effects. Especially women affiliated with the supernatural. Trust me on this. Love? Well then that explains it. I mean, she's my mom, of course she loves me. Instead of clarifying what it was that Sona had been potentially implying, Ddraig opted to give his own opinion. I believe it may be a mixture of both. While not strong enough to be an active dragon tamer, her presence was more agreeable than most humans. The conversation afterwards had slimmed down. Sona briefly inquiring about Issei's training progress and then into unimportant small talk. Issei had actually held a small conversation with Yura and Tomo, wanting to get to know them a bit since they hadn't really had the opportunity yet. He found that he liked both of them. Yura was easy to talk to, very calm overall. She had a fondness for physical activity that made him want to ask her to train with him. Tomo had been the quietest of the peerage as far as he'd seen, but once he actually got to talk to her, she was by far the most energetic. It was almost like she had a switch to go from a loyal silent knight into a bouncing happy teenage girl. In Issei's opinion. It made no sense. He had forgotten to ask if his father had been notified that he was home now, so he called him. Based on the panic on the other end of the phone, he guessed that his dad hadn't been told. So he quickly made his way home. And once the paternal Haidu set foot in his home, he had to do a double take at what he saw. His son, the well-known pervert of the town who had been on the mend, was surrounded by girls, all of whom seemed to actually like his company. He couldn't be more proud at that moment. The sun had long set when the Citri peerage decided to head home, however reluctant the two bishops may have been after hearing that the Kendo duo would stay over for the night. Elsha, why did the astral projection training suddenly seem so important? Issei sat cross-legged in front of Elsha in her garden. She had told him that other than training his fire, the astral projection would take precedence over everything else. Once he could project an image of himself and Elsha simultaneously for at least 5 minutes, then they would resume his regular training. But she never explained why. You don't want to learn it? She asked with a curious tilt of her head. Issei gave a defensive wave of his hands. I do. Elsha granted him a smile and held onto his hands with hers. As she closed her eyes, Issei interrupted the process of starting the projection. I'm just curious is all. It sounds like a cool thing to be able to do. But shouldn't I be training to help Kaichu and Reya's Gremory? Even with being spoken to, Elsha hadn't let go of his hands or opened her eyes. Instead she initiated the astral projection. Issei felt a sense of brief vertigo, his vision darkening before seeing the setting of his bedroom come into view. He could see himself laying in bed, which felt really strange to be looking at himself. He looked down to his hands, which were fairly transparent and still being held by Elsha. Issei looked up to her to see that she was just as transparent as he was. Elsha was looking towards the door curiously, almost like she was waiting for something. The feeling of vertigo was slowly starting to build again, the outer rim of his vision slowly darkening. Just before he couldn't hold on to their projection anymore, he could have sworn he saw his door slowly creak open. His vision went completely dark for a brief moment before he was back in Elsha's garden once again. As he opened his eyes again, he saw the smiling visage of his mentor. Her thumbs caressed a brief circle against the back of his own before letting go. I'd say that's a good improvement, you went from 5 seconds on your first try to 12. Issei frowned at the remark. It didn't sound like a good improvement when she wanted him to get to 5 minutes until they moved on. But doing over double the initial time with the dual astral projection was at least something. But it's nowhere near what I need to move on to the other training. Issei's self-deprecating statement had brought a rare sight to Elsha's beautiful face. A frown. Her right hand rose with her fingers straight and seemed to be tensed, as if to hold their position. Then her hand descended quickly onto the middle of his frontal lobe. The fact that you could even do it at all the first time was a miracle. Elsha scolded his self-loathing statement after delivering a chop to his head. Her blue and green eyes softened as they locked onto his. Her hands raised themselves to hold onto his cheeks. Her tone was soft and reassuring when he met her gaze. You've been thrust into a world of things you had never even thought existed, you've taken this all so well. Stop selling yourself short. I know it's hard for you to tell the difference, but you're almost twice as strong as you were when Sona Citri reincarnated you. If you keep this pace up with the training that is planned for you, that phoenix will kneel before you and your friends and family will be safe once any potential enemies know it is you that protects them. Her tone was reassuring. If someone who was one of the strongest red dragons said that he was making good progress, then he'd take it at that. Besides, how was he supposed to really know how much progress someone should be able to make in a week? Elsha looked up for a brief moment towards the sky, just like she had the first time they met. There was a quick look that crossed her face that Issei couldn't really name. But just as soon as it came, it quickly left. She gave her student her full attention once more. I wanted you to be proficient with astral projection because of the challenge presented to you, this rating game. The Red Dragon's destructive powers are something truly formidable. With training and practice, there will be few that can stand against you. But if you were to add the element of surprise as well. And that numbers dwindles down even further. Her serious tone quickly turned a mix of playful and mischievous. There's also a selfish one thrown in there too, but that one's a surprise for now. The last day of his weekend was spent in his now normal routine. A run in the morning, come back for breakfast with his parents. His father started to bombard Issei with questions about all the girls that had come over the night previous. Seemed to deflate when he heard that it was just the members of the student council from school. Issei decided that he would take it easy before returning to school, just relaxing around the house. There was something strange he noticed as he and his parents watched a movie together. His mother had lost that smell of strawberries and sugar when she had been baking before. That subtle smell of some sort of fruit he couldn't name was still there, just within the range of being able to be sensed by him. But the thing he found strange was the scent from his father. Or the lack thereof. Issei had quickly come to relate the sense of the people around him with some aspect of their personality, a unique trait or an ability. But his father was like the masses of his school, a scentless bar of soap. Apparently being just as he appeared, a normal average guy. Issei would be eternally grateful that his life seemed to fall into a routine once again. Coming to Kuo Academy had brought so much change so quickly that he wondered if he could have kept up in class if it continued. It took some adjusting, but it was easy enough to get the swing of things. Wake up. Run. Breakfast. Get to school, get attack hugged by Momo before class. Lunch with Yui and Kaori. Walk with Momo and Reya to the student council, check to see if Sona had anything for him to do. Get the shit beat out of him at Kendo. Dinner. Training. Repeat. The first alteration to this plan came from Sona. She felt that it was due time for Issei to get some on-the-job training of making a contract. The normal way for a devil to be summoned was usually through a magic transportation circle. But as Sona had explained after a failed attempt, Issei's body was lacking in demonic power. His strength came from his dragon side. So normal human transportation was his only way to get to the address. At least he was out of the room from Tama laughing at his misfortune. The bike ride brought him to a small single-story house, the curtains closed and looking old and weathered. Laying his bike against the inside of the fence, Issei walked up to the door and rang the doorbell. In the late afternoon sun, Issei could see the curtains to his right shift slightly, the person inside peeking through to look for the visitor. A few moments later, the sound of multiple locks being undone on the inside latch of the door could be heard, and the door slowly creaked open. Opened just enough to fit a head through, a young man in his early 20s with dark brown almost black hair that was shaved down peeked through, dark blue eyes regarding Issei with caution. "Who are you, what do you want?" The timid voice of the man hadn't been what Issei was expecting, but answered politely. "Sorry I'm a bit late, but I couldn't use the normal flashy way to get here." The man looked at Issei speculatively before asking. "You're the devil." Issei chuckled and scratched at the back of his head. "One of many, but yay. And I'm here to grant your request for a suitable price." After a few moments of silence, the young man unlocked the door and led Issei into what appeared to be a kid's room and introduced himself as Hedwig. Whatever Issei had been expecting as his first contract job, this definitely wasn't it. All Hedwig wanted was to listen to music and play some games, and the device that Sona gave him to calculate the price had said all he would receive in the end of it was a comic book. Hedwig went as pale a ghost and hesitantly went to the desk in his room, grabbed what appeared to be the only comic book in the place, and held it out to Issei. 3 hours of repetitive techno music and 17 rounds in Soul Calibur later, Issei made his way out with his prize and the pride of having completed his first contract. His ride back home was spent listening to Ddraig and Elsha say how weird the way he acted was. It was like Hedwig was mentally 9 years old or something. But Issei wasn't going to complain about such an easy job. Ready for this weekend, Ice? He glanced over his shoulder to see Tomo, the knight of his group, rocking from her heels to her toes. She and Yura had just walked into the student council office, where the rest of their group were hard at work preparing paperwork for upcoming school events. Class forms for what kind of display, booth, or type of entertainment they would each provide. It was a little monotonous, but once they had built a rhythm, it was pretty easy to get everything sorted. "I know I should probably be nervous. But I'm more excited than anything," he answered her with a smile. "You're welcome." A flash of green on his left arm, the boosted gear appeared for seemingly no reason other than for Ddraig to make himself known as the boosted gear manifested. Pretty much all movement stopped from the girls, all looking at the object that had a being with power they would likely never comprehend. Ddraig didn't speak much when in the presence of the Citri peerage, choosing to usually let Issei handle the situation. But every once in a while, he would. And this was the reaction for each of those times. Issei glanced at his arm for a moment, not stopping his task. Welcome for what, Ddraig? Nice of you to join us, by the way. You being excited is from the prospect of getting stronger, of looking forward to a good fight. Dragons have always strived for power, to protect what is theirs. Issei hummed in thought as the way Ddraig worded that made a lightbulb in his mind flip on. Issei had noticed a possessiveness to himself that had never been there before. It became noticeable when he saw some blonde idiot hitting on murayama. It was obvious to everyone around, except the idiot himself, that she wanted nothing to do with him. His immediate thoughts were to march over there and melt his feet to the ground, then slowly peel back each inch of his skin. Oh, the joy Issei would get from teaching this moron to tread on what was his. It was a similar feeling to when he walked into his Kendo club as they were changing, only much stronger. Issei shook his head to clear the thoughts. I don't see myself ever getting used to that feeling. He said quietly, forgetting that the girls around him had supernatural hearing. She seemed quite pleased by how you handled the situation. Elsha brought herself into the conversation. When the feeling got to be too much to handle, Issei had walked over and reminded her about their plans for dinner at his place the week after the break. The blonde idiot muttered about how some guys have all the luck as he sulked his way off campus. Kaori had apparently wanted to complete the image and walked back arm in arm with him towards the Kendo club room. The side effects that he had been expecting were still there. And it seemed to turn into some sort of game between Momo and Reya. The main one was his lust and seeing how well he could control it. In the months since his reincarnation, in combination with his new hormones and instincts, he'd gone back and forth with keeping it under control. Instead of the few days of reacting on instinct like Elsha had thought, it had been a rather steady build. Issei was thankful for that, as it gave him time to adjust to the feeling. Their games started about 2 weeks ago. And Issei thought that Yui and Kaori were going to spontaneously combust with the rage they had emitted. Walking to school had been the same, the trio walked through the gates when Issei caught the scent of maple and wintergreen. An odd combination if this had anything to do with food. The scents were approaching quickly, and Issei had barely been able to turn to his left before Momo crashed into him. But unlike her usual glumps, where she would hug him tight enough to be on the border of human capabilities, this time she threw her arms around his neck and pulled herself up to give him a surprise kiss. He would have thought it was accidental contact if it weren't for the way her hand had moved to grab the back of his head and the sultry smile after she pulled back. And once she had, Reya calmly stepped up to him, almost standing on his feet. She pulled a loose necktie that he'd decided to wear for once, since Sona was really strict about rules and appearances, and placed a kiss of equal measure to Momo's. Ever since then, they would do that at least once a day. Sometimes before classes started or at lunch or when he entered the student council. If they were trying to get him flustered and confused. It was working. Tannan will be a great asset for your training. I hope you're prepared to get a little singed, cuckoo. Ddraig had warned Issei that Tannan had one of the hottest flames in existence before, but took a strange pleasure in the unease it brought to his host. Issei's face warped into a mix of anticipation of what he could accomplish this next week and concern over his physical being. Hopefully this former Dragon King wouldn't take things too far. I'm sure you'll come back to us much stronger. If you're hurt when you return, Reya and I can nurse you back to health. Momo said as she rubbed one hand on his back between his shoulder blades. He had never known that such a simple gesture on such a non-sensual part of his body could almost turn him into goo in her hands, but when she figured it out, Momo took advantage of it. Nurses. Issei mumbled, Momo's tender mercies making him lose focus and control. His mind picturing the two of them in sexy nurse outfits. Tight white blouses half unbuttoned, short skirts and the white cap. Momo, Reya, Tomo and Yura laughed as Sona rolled her eyes at her pawn. Issei. Focus. Sona snapped her fingers in front of his eyes. His eyes refocused themselves from the glazed over look they'd held and centering themselves on his king. Sorry Kaichu. He said, a hand rubbing the back of his head. She merely nodded before moving on. I'll be taking you to meet with Tannan tomorrow around 11 a.m. Be sure that you've packed sufficiently for the week. Issei snapped himself straight and held a salute to his king. As you command, laddie. Even though she rolled her eyes at him again, the small hint of a smile was enough to tell him that she wasn't upset by the gesture. She knew it was just him being his rather goofy self. We're done here for the day. You're all dismissed, report back Monday morning for distribution of the forms. Ice, you're heading out tomorrow, right? For that youth leader gathering? His mother stopped him as he was about to head upstairs from the dinner table. Issei turned around and faced her from the kitchen doorway. Yay. Kaichu is coming to pick me up around 11 and we'll head out then. His mother turned her head from washing the last few dishes towards her son. Are any of the others on your student council going? No, just the two of us. The others either have other responsibilities or just didn't feel it was for them. Mrs. Haidu nodded with a smile. I see. I'm glad you got into that school, it seems to have done a world of good for you. Me too, Mom. Well, I'm off to bed. Love you. His mother stood there, watching her son walk away. The changes over the last couple months had been a weight off her shoulders. But these last few weeks she started picking up on subtle things happening with her small family. She loved her son dearly, but up until he met those two girls that seemed to be glued to his side, she'd written off any good future for him due to his tendencies. He was calmer now and actually thought about his actions. How he was managing that, she wasn't sure. Because the girls he seemed to surround himself with were all prime examples of how today's youth mature faster than all previous generations. Especially that red-headed one that came by when Issei was sick. When Issei was in middle school, he was distant from herself and her husband because they almost always got into an argument over his behavior. So a pleasant conversation was not something that happened very often, if at all. She hadn't heard him say that he loved her in far too long. She was so happy to have her son back. Not the lecture that the neighborhood placed secret bets on how long until he was on a sexual predator list, but the kind caring boy he'd been before Irina left the country. Things were almost perfect, in her opinion. She had a loving, hardworking husband and a son that was working towards what looked to be a great future. But there was one small hiccup that had come along and she made a mental note to bring it up with her husband the next time it showed up. After her little fainting episode, Issei would now wish them a good night with a love you before heading to his room. After a week of that, her husband had started getting snippy with Issei. If Issei noticed it, he kept himself composed extraordinarily well. Because the third time it happened, she wanted to bite her husband's head off. All he'd done was praise her cooking, the same thing he had done not even 10 seconds before their son. Don't talk with food in your mouth. It wasn't what he said. It was the angry tone that she didn't like. It was uncalled for. No one talks to my baby like that without a damn good reason. She whispered to herself. Not even his father. Issei closed his notebook, finished with the last of his homework, and laid on his bed. He was thankful that Ddraig and Elsha were giving him the night off of the typical night training, since for the next week he'd be in a live fire situation. His mind wandered to the girls he was now friends with. And he had been very careful not to just say girlfriends, to avoid any sort of misunderstanding. Other than being a little more physical, there wasn't much that had changed between his relationship with Yui and Kaori. And that related to both their Kendo club practices and otherwise. After the kissing game started for Momo and Reya, they felt the need to attach themselves to him in some way as they walked to school. He'd asked about their change in behavior the second day of it. After a brief glare from both of them, they simply said that he clearly needed a reminder of who his best friends were. Referring to themselves and not Matsuda and Motohama. Other than the obvious physical attention from the two bishops, Issei had learned quite about them. Momo had a near-constant craving for ice cream, her favorite being mint chocolate chip. Her and Reya had taken to doing yoga together and had offered to show him their poses. She was also very fond of hugs, a fact he had already gathered. Her favorite color was orange. Reya cooked pancakes for herself almost every morning. Her favorite pastime when she was free was reading poetry. Her and Momo were living together in an apartment away from their families, under the guise of getting a scholarship to go to Kuo. Blue was her favorite color. The only thing that Yura did on a regular schedule of her own was to watch UFC and work out. She lived with her grandmother the next town over and was talking to Sona about getting an apartment of her own, not wanting to keep watching her last living blood relative slowly slip away from her Huntington's disease. Issei was surprised to find out that Tomo had also lived in Kuo all her life. She lived with her parents and an older brother in his mid-20s. She loved anything soft, fluffy, or squishy. He'd found out that around the time he had first seen her, she had gotten her first exposure to coffee. And caffeine ran straight through her. She had admitted all too readily that she had to pee 14 times that day and drank about 2 gallons of water. Tsubaki and Sona were still as much of a mystery to him as they had been since the beginning. All he knew about either of them was that Tsubaki came from a family that was renowned for dealing with evil spirits and Sona was a high-class devil. If there was one thing that Issei wanted to change soon, it was his relationship with the king and queen, especially Sona. He handed his life to her and was expected to serve her in whatever way she requested, right? How was he supposed to do that when he knew nothing about her? Issei figured that by getting closer to Sona, he could learn more about Tsubaki as well, since they were rarely apart. Glancing over at his clock, Issei realized that it was almost midnight. He shifted under the blanket, ready for the first night's sleep without being dragged into his own consciousness to train. In the morning, he would have to pack for his week away. Of all the ways for supernatural beings to travel, a train was not one that would be on Issei's list of interdimensional vehicles. But he had only been a devil for a month. Just as she had said, Sona had rang his doorbell the moment the clock struck 11. There was a brief conversation about what they hoped to learn with his parents. Then the two teenagers had set on their way to the underworld. The train itself didn't look like anything out of the ordinary, and when Issei had said as much, Sona told him that was the point. They were in a human train station, and the public around them could see the train, as well as the two of them boarding it. She had also explained that there was a suggestion spell that kept humans from trying to board it. Issei. Sona called out, bringing her pawn's attention away from the swirl of iridescence outside the window. Yes, Kaichu. The pair sat across from each other in the middle car of the train. Her reasoning was that it was the front car of the train that the Grimory and Citri families shared. It wasn't that they couldn't afford their own train, but they just didn't see the need. The two families were good friends, and with a relatively low number of people that could or would use the train, requesting it was no problem at all. About your father, Sona started. Instantly Issei looked back out the window, trying to hide the way he felt about what had been happening. He had hoped that no one would notice. But Sona saw how Mr. Haidu was acting when she picked him up. She had done some research on dragons since she had basically recruited one. The pros and cons. Things to expect and what not to do. Yeah, I know. Elsha and Ddraig explained it to me. That explains a few things about my childhood at the very least. The first time his father had snapped at him, Issei was confused. He hadn't done anything wrong as far as he was aware. His two residents had explained what was going on, and it was just as stupid as it was strange. His father felt jealous about the newfound relationship between him and his mother. He felt that Issei, his own son, was a risk to his marriage. But Ddraig had quickly elaborated that it was a male's typical response to what he had become. To become aggressive, defensive, and territorial. I had always wondered why other boys my age would start off nice and then get all angry and aggressive with me. Turns out those rumors of kids being more susceptible to the supernatural are true. And my dormant sacred gear affected them just as much as my active one affects my dad. Other than staying quiet around him or avoiding him completely, I'm not sure what I can do about it. Sona kept her eyes locked onto the side of his head. She didn't need their connection through the evil pieces to know that this was hurting him. He told them how happy he was that his parents were proud of him again. And now this. But just like he'd said, there was really nothing that could be done to. The bracelet. She said, the epiphany coming to her from out of nowhere. Issei turned back to her, an eyebrow raised in confusion. The bracelet. She nodded. Under normal circumstances, Issei wouldn't have the means to negate the way that his father reacted to him. But it became all too apparent that Issei had come in contact with at least a few people that were aware of the supernatural. One of which had given him a priceless bracelet that would solve his problem, if only temporarily. It negates the effects and makes you appear completely human. If you were to wear it at home, then your father hopefully wouldn't react negatively towards you. The smile that came over her pawn's face could have blotted out the sun. The warmth that came from their connection almost made her think he was about to proclaim his undying love for her. Issei leapt from his seat and in an instant her wrapped in his arms and was spinning around laughing. Sona's hands wrapped around his neck seemingly out of instinct to keep herself from being flung into the wall or to the floor. Normally she would have never allowed such an action upon her person. But this wave of joy and relief she felt from Issei made her just want to enjoy the moment. It had been a long time since she felt anything like it except from the obsessive antics from her sister. Sona was head and shoulders above him as he held her by the waist. When he stopped spinning, he planted his head onto her stomach and gave her an extra squeeze. Thank you, Kaichu, thank you so much. No matter how she felt about his abrupt actions, Sona was not accustomed to displays of affection. She had no problem smiling or laughing with her peerage, as few as those moments seemed to be. But hugs and kisses had been beyond her almost since the start of her training to become the head of her family. A handshake was the most familiar she had gotten with anyone in a long time. So she settled for what she could handle. Instead of trying to hug him back, she merely patted him on the head. You're very welcome. She spoke kindly with a smile. Now put me down. And the heiress persona was back up. One more squeeze and Issei did just that. Both sets of feet planted back on the ground, they returned to their seats and Sona continued with the schedule for the next week. During the day, you will train with Tannan. I will be checking up on you occasionally once you've finished. We will also start on your knowledge of devil history and overall strategy. The rest of the train ride Sona gave Issei an overview of the underworld's history. Who controlled what, major cities, historic events, things that would at least give him an insight into what he would have to know if he wanted to ever be moved from low class. And his desire for a harem assured her that he would want that. It would also help her plan that she discussed with Reya's. Mountains. Outside of the window from the train flying through the air, it almost all Issei could see. The color of the rocks changed from brownish red to gray to a dark gray that was almost back. Sona's overview had ended once they heard that they were entering Tannan's territory. Issei had tried his best to stay on topic, but there were a few times that he found himself getting lost in those violet eyes of hers. He wasn't even sure himself what it was. Issei had a long-standing history of that only happening with him eyeing a girl's chest. He wasn't even sure what it was that drew him in. It wasn't the connection between them, as it happened the first time he saw her, before he was reincarnated. Those her eyes were so crystal clear, their color so vibrant. Sona seemed to notice every time it happened too, because she stopped talking for a few seconds to let him regain himself before continuing. Issei felt he learned a great deal from her. The highest-ranked families, of which Reya's was a descendant of. The Devil Civil War and the new leaders that became of it. The basics of how a raiding game worked. How demonic energy differed from any other pantheons. Those few hours during the ride flew by. The train landed itself and the duo stepped out onto the grounds. Issei marveled at the height of the mountains before him. They seemed to go on forever. Their height was easily comparable to the highest mountain ranges in the human realm, and no matter how far left or right he looked, they were all he saw. There was little in terms of plant life here, but off in the distance, he did see a group of trees that seemed to be bearing some sort of fruit. Other than the landscape, the first thing that Issei noticed was the scent lingering in the air. Fire, frost, and if the tingling of his nose was anything to go by, electricity. Sona stood beside him as the beating of wings could be heard in the distance. The strokes seemed to be far apart, signifying a large creature was approaching. "Your instructor is right on time," she said, gazing off to the left. They both watched as a figure elevated itself above the mountains. At first, the size didn't seem substantial, just a purple blur in the distance. But as the beating of the wings continued and Tannan drew closer, Issei saw just how wrong he was. Once the dragon was nearly directly above them, he covered almost all of Issei's vision. He was massive. The ground shook as his feet touched the ground. The blaze meteor dragon Tannan stood at 15 meters tall. Most of his skin, or scales, were a dark maroon, almost purple. His chest and abdomen were gray, and yellow horns protruded from the top sides of his skull, arching forward towards and in front of his face, just above eye level. "Welcome, Lady Citri." He greeted politely, a slight nod of his head to pay her due respect. Sona had informed Issei that Tannan was an ultimate class devil and had no need to pay such respects to those ranked below him, but he was known for his adherence to devil culture. The massive dragon turned to Issei and smirked. "You must be Issei Haidu, Ddraig's wielder." Issei could only manage a stuttering nod. "I hope you're ready to get put through the ring of fire, hatchling." The remark had Issei's blood boiling for some unknown reason. Whether it was from anger or anticipation he couldn't figure out. But he knew that being compared to a baby was definitely insulting, that much he was certain of. Sona felt the connection between her and Issei start to bubble with an indignant rage and couldn't stop him before he blurted his response out. "Just you wait, old man. I'll take whatever you can dish out. I'll show you, Elsha and Ddraig, that'll be the best red dragon emperor the world has ever beeping seen." Eyes. Sona blanched at how her pawn had acted, for both the disrespect and the profanity. This was not how she had been training him to act in front of someone of a high position. Tannan just threw his head back and laughed. His voice reverberated through the area and echoed off the mountains, not seeming at all miffed by the way he was spoken to. "Attaboy. We'll make you into a fine member of our kind yet. Ooh, this is gonna be fun." The legendary dragon set his eyes to Sona. "Don't worry about it, Lady Citri. I provoked him to see how far along his new body had taken hold. I guarantee that by the end of the week, he'll be stronger than your other peerage members, maybe even as strong as yourself." Sona looked between her pawn and the dragon towering over them and was a little concerned at the identical grins they were sporting. She cleared her throat. "Thank you for the quick acceptance of my request. It is an honor to have a member of my peerage to have teacher of your caliber." Tannan waved off the compliment, knowing it was all for show, an aspect he liked the least of the devils he had decided to join. "No need for a show here, Lady Citri. I get it. For some reason or another, you need the boy at the top of his game as soon as possible. I would have accepted training the boy even if he wasn't a devil, just for the prospect of training my first wielder of Ddraig." His statement was refreshing to Sona, who was so accustomed to maintaining a proper appearance with those older or higher rank than yourself. She gave the dragon a small smile. "Yes, you're right. Reya and myself are grateful that you've accepted. I'm sure you'll enjoy watching his exploits in the next coming year." The scales that would have been an eyebrow rose. Then a knowing smirk came over him. "So that's what the plan is, eh? My lips are sealed. It will be most entertaining to watch that match." Sona gave Issei a look that he couldn't read. Expectation. Worry. Pride. It was far too complicated for him. "Yes, I'm sure it will, the debut of the millennia." Sona had parted from Issei and Tannan shortly after and entered her office to clear up some last-minute paperwork. It didn't really need to be done now, but she liked to get things done ahead of time if she could. Leaving Issei there was harder than she'd expected. It felt like she was handing over a precious gem to a shady jeweler to refine and cut to be placed into a necklace. She preferred handling matters pertaining to her peerage herself, but this situation called for a different approach. She had been upfront about her intentions of recruiting Issei, of wanting him to help her open a raiding game school, her first step in changing the views of the underworld. Having someone of significant strength was a big must-have for that. She needed him to be at least stronger than half of the high-class devil population by the time it opened. She knew that eventually, she would come to care for him like she did for the rest of her peerage. She just hadn't expected it to happen so quickly. Was it the additional pieces? Was it his willingness to learn from them and to prove they could count on him? Was it the eagerness he showed in getting to know each of them? Was it that goofy smile? Sona wasn't sure if it was one aspect or all of them together, but Issei was quickly making himself to be an irreplaceable part of their group. If things continued at this pace, she wasn't sure she'd want to hand him over to Reya's at all. Even if it were only for the month of her raiding game. Their group just wouldn't feel the same. Those kind of thoughts were for later though, for right now, she had a promise to keep. Fingering through the student files, Sona quickly found what she was looking for, the 2 phone numbers of Issei's Kendo friends. Sona picked up the phone from her desk and dialed the one for Kaori Murayama. Issei had told her that the 2 of them would be together and Murayama's would be the better bet for one of them answering. It rang once, twice, 3 times before it was picked up and answered by the now familiar voice. Hello? Sitting at her desk once more, Sona sat like she would if the girls were in front of her. It helped to keep up her strict student council persona in both image and voice. Hello? This is Vice President Shitori. She started, keeping to her alias. As you know, Issei Haidu is away for Golden Week. Before we parted ways, he asked me to deliver something to you and Yui Katase. The receiver of her phone gave off some noise of shuffling, a muffled voice in the background. Murayama had covered the phone to speak to the other girl in question, no doubt. Alright. What is it that you have for us? I assume that you're aware with my group's particular methods of travel. Sona was referring to using a magic circle to travel to where a potential client held their flyer. We are. The girl's voice was flat and stoic. Sona couldn't particularly blame them for not coming around to the devils of Kuo just yet, not after the introduction they'd had to her kind. Sona had pulled the 2 of them aside the day that Issei had awoken and wanted to find out how they had come to know the existence of devils. The glares she received were just as telling as the actual words. Yui Katase was the daughter of one of the previous Kuo warden's clients. Both of her parents frequently called upon Cleria Belial for various things. Her mother was killed by a stray that had picked up on the demonic presence lingering on her. Afterwards, her father was approached by the Gremory family to work on finding locations to expand the Kuo Academy brand, sending him away from his daughter. Kaori Murayama's parents both worked for a company that her own family owned. A pharmaceutical company specializing in terminal illness medications. The parents were sent to the main building in Sapporo, where the company had planned to move all but one branch, as a recent breakthrough required all hands on deck. The 2 girls had each found out separately, seeing the summoning of a devil from discrete spots in their respective homes, and only realized that the other knew based on finding the flyers in the other's home. Having your family's lives turned upside down was an adequate reason to discriminate against devils, Sona admitted. Issei wanted me to give each of you a flyer to use in case you were in danger while he was gone. I understand you may be reluctant to take them, but this was his request and he was very adamant that you take them. Sona had to make sure that they knew this wasn't for her or any of the other devils in town. It was for their friend. There was a brief silence over the phone as Sona assumed Murayama was contemplating what to do. They both knew that Issei's biggest priority was the safety of those close to him. Refusing the flyer would upset him. A sigh came through the speaker and Sona knew she'd been able to keep her word. Fine. We'll come pick them up in an hour. Sona had to hand it to the Kendo duo. Their loyalty to Issei seemed absolute and if he managed to get promoted to high class in a relatively short amount of time, he would have 2 very dedicated servants. And more than likely, lovers as well. Whether or not those 2 realized it, they were in love with her pawn. Her entire peerage saw it, except Issei it seemed. He had voiced his confusion over their anger from her bishop's physical signs of affection as of late. That is acceptable, I will meet you at the campus gates. Sona didn't bother with any more pleasantries or goodbyes, as the girls on the other side were more than likely to just hang up anyway. She heard the click just as she pulled the phone away from her ear. Sona opened a drawer in her desk and just on top were the flyers with her family crest. She grabbed 2 of the flyers, setting them on her desk and waited until the appropriate time to go to the campus gates. Issei had decided that Tannan was as much a sadistic trainer as he was a big purple dragon. They had come into a clearing over a mile long and 2 miles wide. And the first thing Tannan did was tell Issei to carry a small white dragon on his back and run the perimeter of the clearing 25 times. The dragon on his back hadn't spoken at all and just hopped onto him as ordered. It was apparently a lightning dragon, because if Issei slowed to a point that was deemed unacceptable, it gave him a very painful shock. Issei had made it 5 laps before almost calling it quits. That was when Tannan had explained just how Issei would get so much stronger so quickly. He wanted Issei to boost twice and transfer the power to his legs, and then once for the mass for the dragon. Tannan had said that while the boosts would help, it would still be his muscles doing the work, and the added strain would help to increase both strength in his legs and stamina. There was also the benefit of his body becoming accustomed to the power the boosted gear would send through him. Shit piss beep cunt beepsiker mother beeper. Issei ranted this stream of curse words in his mind repeatedly as the burn intensified. He was currently on his 21st lap and had no idea how he could still be standing on his own 2 feet, let alone carrying a dragon that weighed who knows what at this point. Boost. Boost. Transfer. The weight got easier for a brief moment, but Issei intimately knew what was coming next. Apparently, he could boost almost indefinitely, as long as the amount power sitting in his body didn't become too much. This batch went to his legs, and his breathing became just a tad easier as he prepared for the next addition to the weight of his hitchhiker. Boost. Transfer. Issei slowed down to barely a jog when the weight changed once again. As painful as this was, Issei had to admit it felt effective. He would be refreshed before a new layer of difficulty was added. Hum on hatching. 2 more laps to go. Tannan called out from the sky, where he was following his pupil. Issei restarted a string of curses in his mind as he did his best to pick up the pace. He was so ready for this to end for the day. Shit piss beep cunt beepsiker mother beeper. He thought the words so much, they developed a rhythm that almost resembled a tune to a song. He pushed with what little energy he had left. He came around the bend to mark the last quarter of the second to last lap. The white dragon on his back shifted the position of its tail only a few inches to the left. But it was enough to get caught in between Issei's legs. His left leg pushed forward, catching the tail with the top of his foot, causing them both to tumble over each other over and over. When they finally came to a stop, Issei's head was spinning from the unexpected change in movement. The loud thud and the tremble in the ground alerted him to his trainer landing somewhere in front of him. He couldn't tell the distance due to his swirling vision. A valiant effort, hatchling. I half expected you to call it quits around the 10th lap, but you're giving it everything you've got. Ansem, you can head home. The white dragon nodded its head, extended the wings that had been flat against its back and flew off. Issei stood up, his legs unsteady due to still being dizzy. He held one hand to his temple to try and stop the world from spinning. So old man, are we done for the day? Issei asked once he could look in the same spot for more than a single second. Haha, absolutely not. You hatchling are a dragon. As such, you should know that you will recover enough to move on to more upper body exercises in about an hour. And that's about the length of time it'll take for you to jog there. Issei groaned, he was hoping to get into something exciting, like improving his fire or other techniques. He fully understood the importance of having a well-trained body, but it didn't make him like what he was being put through so far. Alright then, where to? Tannan lifted a clawed hand to point between 2 larger mountains, a pathway visible between them. For that passage is the valley of Dragon Mountain. Once you make it there, you'll find a tree bearing dragon apples. You'll wait there until your sparring partner arrives. Dragon apples. He'd never heard of such a thing, but then again, he was in the underworld, a place he never really considered existed in the first place. The fruit that some dragons require to live. They only grow in the underworld now. Ddraig hadn't manifested the boosted gear this time, instead just the green glow on the back of Issei's hand appeared when he spoke, right where the gem on the gauntlet would usually be. What do they taste like? Issei asked as he started a slow jog towards the place Tannan had indicated. There is nothing in the human world to compare them to. Perhaps if the harvest has been sufficient, Tannan will allow you to have one. There was a gold shimmer in Issei's line of sight, it looked like golden dust particles were gathering together. It was strange how the golden thing seemed to be moving with Issei, staying in the same spot in his vision as he moved forward. What the hell is that? Was he exhausted enough to be hallucinating? It didn't feel that bad. In fact, Issei was recovering his strength just like Tannan had said. One moment. Came Elsha's voice again. The gold shimmer started to get denser, but still somewhat transparent. It was beginning to look like an outline of a body. The legs were long and slender, coming up well-rounded hips and a thin waist. As the form came up to the chest, Issei finally noticed what was missing. Clothes. Well-rounded breasts led up to the blonde-haired and mix-eyed face of Elsha, who was smiling triumphantly. Ah, much better. She looked at Issei's face, which was wide-eyed and open-mouthed as he stared at her while still jogging. What's the matter, Ice? Elsha asked with her head tilted to the left, a strand of her hair slipping from her ear and over her shoulder. Are you two conspiring with the girls to test my self-control? Because this will be torture if you are. I have nothing to do with this. Draig's voice was flat as he watched through his host's eyes. What are you talking about? Issei closed his eyes for a brief second to take a calming breath. The shaking of his movement made him open his eyes almost right away to force the uncoordinated feeling away. Okay. 1. How did you do that? And 2. You're naked. Elsha's eyes widened and she peered down to her projected body and saw the lack of clothing. She wasn't bothered by it, as nudity hadn't been a big concern during her time. Yes, I am. Does my naked body bother you? You sought to gaze at naked girls frequently in middle school. Issei was trying really hard to keep his eyes on where he was going and not on her body. But his control was slipping, spending just as much time looking at her as he was the path he was following. Bother me? No way, you're easily the hottest naked girl I've ever seen. But it is very distracting. He wasn't sure if he could even touch her, but if she either didn't put clothes on or stop what he could only assume was some form of astral projection, he knew without a doubt he'd try. I see. Elsha tapped her chin and thought the way her arms were against her chest only made them more pronounced. After you're done for the day, we'll try this again. Maybe after some rest, my clothes will manifest as well. Her image became more transparent before shimmering away completely. Line break. Issei laid his head against the long log beside the fire he'd started, staring up into the strange purple sky. I left on Saturday, so that would make today Friday, he asked himself. As tiring as the training was, it made the days go by in a flash. Issei found himself losing track of how long he'd been out here and how much longer he had left. Yay. It's Friday. Tannan had left a while ago, leaving Issei to his own devices. Or more accurately, to leave him at the mercy of the Norsefire dragon and Ddraig. The day had been more of what Issei had been looking forward to during this training period. He was sparring against a blizzard dragon named Ddraig. Tannan had explained that while at a glance his own fire would put him at an advantage, blizzard dragons were able to manipulate that ice. So if the area they fought in became covered in the frost, he could easily be taken down. Issei had been hard-pressed to physically overpower the dragon. After being nearly ripped apart by the ice shards around the field, Issei jumped out of the way and towards the edge of the battlefield, setting most of the ground on fire to melt all the ice around them. It ended in a stalemate when both of them sank down to the ground, breathless. Issei held up the fruit that Tannan had been growing on his territory. The dragon apple. A darker shade of red than apples in the human world, a bit larger too. But the taste was nothing like he could describe, just like Ddraig had said. It was juicy, sweet, and a bit tangy. It was also now Issei's favorite fruit. Until he'd taken a bite of it, he had a hard time believing that one of these fruits was able to sustain a fully grown dragon unless they ate all that the tree had growing on it. Whatever these things did to dragons was amazing. They were filling, able to quell the hunger built from the harsh training. And it helped soothe his aching muscles. There was one other mystery solved now that he'd held the fruit. The nameless scent that Issei had picked up from his mother was sitting here in his hand. The thought made him feel a little homesick. Well, maybe homesick wasn't the right word, but he was concerned for her safety since he wasn't there. And overall, he just missed her. The lunches she made him for school, the way her hugs just made him feel totally accepted and loved, her calming presence. Damn it. Stupid dragon tamer traits. It's making me sound like sniffling 5-year-old. He grumbled to himself. The gold shimmer of light that had become all too familiar during this week caught his attention. And a still naked Elsha walked over and laid down next to Issei. You know that you can't help it, Ice. It's how the dragon tamer's ability works. You've heard those old stories about a dragon guarding a young woman in a tower. That's usually a dragon tamer being guarded by the one she connects with. Over the years the true accounts have been bastardized to ignore the fact that the savior was trying to kidnap her in the first place. Issei turned his head to look at her, trying his best to look her in the eyes and not gaze at her spectacular body. Are all dragon tamers female? Elsha nodded, noticing the way that his eyes kept wanting to shift to her chest. He was doing a good job of it tonight. Yes. To my knowledge, there has never been a male dragon tamer. Issei thought about a male dragon tamer having the same effect on him that his mother did. The thought made him cringe and shiver. For the sake of my sanity, I hope I never prove that statement wrong. Issei sat up and finally allowed himself to look over Elsha's body. If there were ever a model image of European beauty, she would definitely been in the running for it. You still haven't answered me on how I can see you or why you're naked. He felt himself get a little hot under the collar when she sat up and stretched with her hands over her head. Your astral projection training has progressed enough to where I can manifest like this with little to no strain on you. I imagine that in another month or so, you'll be able to feel me touching you, as well as have others see me. I could form my clothes, but that would significantly shorten the length I can stay like this. And I am enjoying spending time with you this way. Issei had to use his hand to cover her body from the shoulders down from his eyesight. So. You're basically a ghost when using the projection. Precisely. Elsha nodded with a bright smile. You spent a few hours out like this the other night. So why did you set the goal for me to reach 5 minutes before? Because while we are in the boosted gear, astral projection is more difficult. You have to bring your mind and part of your soul back into your body and then redirect it outward. It was a quick way to get your ability up to par. Plus I had you project both of us, thus adding to the difficulty. Issei was starting to get near the end of what he'd be able to comprehend on this subject, so he asked what he felt were the important aspects of this magic. Alright. How long are you able to stay in this ghost form? And can I see the same way I could when it was activated from the sacred gear? In this transparent form, about 8 hours. If we try to fully visible, spiritually tangible body, about 4 minutes. And yes, you can see the same way even if you're conscious. Issei had been trying to fall asleep for the last 30 minutes now, the smoldering campfire to the side of him still radiating enough warmth. After his talk with Elsha, he wanted to try and use the astral projection for a few minutes. He was glad to see that she was telling the truth, that it was easier, the image was also a lot cleaner. Before there was always this bluish gray hue to everything, but this time it was crystal clear. Once he'd stopped and wanted to get some shut-eye to be well rested for the next day of training, his second to last day here, his mind was racing with the possible uses of his new skill. Teching an area with possible enemies without the need to send a person in to scout. He could have Elsha watch behind him to prevent a sneak attack. Distract someone when they saw her and make them look the other way. If he'd had this ability a year ago, he'd only have used it to peek on the girls. The idea sounded tempting, but the backlash probably wouldn't be worth the trouble. Plus Elsha seemed to have no problem being naked around him, so he could get his naked flesh viewing quota filled almost whenever or wherever. It still made him want to touch though. His thoughts were finally calming down enough to where he'd be able to fall asleep. With his eyes closed, his hearing and sense of smell felt amplified, even though he knew that wasn't true. The smell of burning wood was most prominent, and behind it he could catch the sense of the forest that the breeze carried over to him. The embers of his fire crackled as the moisture evaporated from the wood. Issei found the sound comforting, like for those who keep a fan on just for the white noise to fall asleep to. A different sound came from off in the distance, almost like a crunch of a foot on the softer dirt over by the tree line. He ignored it for the time being, choosing to listen to the strange birds quietly chirping from above and behind him. He heard it again, that crunch, but it was closer this time. Issei could tell that it definitely a foot this time. Trying to appear as though he was asleep, he weighed his options of what to do. He could call out to the person, hoping they'd respond. He just open his eyes, get up and look. Or he could project himself to keep his facade of being asleep in place. This is a good chance to practice the projection ice. Use it and watch whoever is approaching. Elsha spoke in his mind. Ddraig must have already fallen asleep, but if things got physical he was sure to wake up. Issei concentrated on himself, the same way he did in the boosted gear. Elsha had described the process as tying a tether from the soul to the body and letting the soul fly freely. He felt the spot that was warmer than the rest of his body and grabbed onto it, picturing himself casting it out like a fishing line. His vision went from pitch black to watching the campfire from above, his body at rest beside it. Looking at his own body, he could already see the difference that these last few days had made. He wasn't the scrawny guy he was before getting into Kuo. Most of the additional muscle was just from the transition into being part dragon, but his training had definitely added some definition. Issei turned to where he thought the footsteps were coming from. Outside of the ring where his campsite was, there was no light to see from. Even with his enhanced night vision, he couldn't pick up any movement. Whoever or whatever was approaching him had yet to move since the last crunch he heard. All he could see was the silhouette of trees and the few bushes surrounding him. Another crunch. Issei spun around, trying to see what had changed positions. But nothing seemed different. Damn. Where are you? That last step was definitely closer. But his new sense of hearing was still something he was getting used to and wasn't able to even guess at how far the sound may have come from. 3 more steps. Issei thought he saw something, but the breeze that came through had made the trees and bushes all sway as well. So again, no luck. If they got any closer, he'd probably have to stop the projection to get ready to protect himself. Issei couldn't think of any positive reason why someone would be sneaking up on him in the middle of the night. The wind picked up again, and Issei looked to his right. The scent he picked up was somewhat familiar, but also held a significant difference as well. Water, it smelled like a fresh rain had just finished, that refreshing scent that his king carried. The difference in it was hard to explain. It was like he could smell the cold in it, so instead of a fresh rainfall, it was more like the waters running off of a glacier. Crisp, crystal clear, refreshing. And very, very cold. Issei spared a glance at his body and oriented himself to where the scent came from. 45 degrees from the left side of the log. He ended the projection, returning to his body. Issei opened his eyes and stood up quickly, turning toward the direction the cold scent came from. There were 2 trees, a bush, and something that looked like it had short vines or hanging branches close to the ground. There was a flash of blue from the unknown thing that Issei had assumed was some sort of weird underworld plant. The pointed projectile came towards his left knee, almost too fast for him to see. But it was still too fast for him to dodge. It collided with his thigh just above the kneecap, and ice started to form around his leg. Shit. This week was making Issei really start to dislike dealing with ice magic users. He took a medium-sized breath, ready to melt his leg free. His head pointed down to his freezing leg and spewed a small but hot flame. The 2-second burst was enough to get himself free. Issei brought his head back up, only to see another flash of blue, this one looking like it was aiming at his chest. He jumped to the right, getting out of the circle around his camp and into the clearing. Issei activated the boosted gear, ready to strike back against his assailant as a larger ice projectile flew by. He could feel Ddraig stirring as the gauntlet covered his arm to the elbow. And so it begins. Issei didn't look at the gem, but asked Ddraig as he kept an eye on his opponent. What begins? Issei started to draw upon the energy in his body, pulling it towards his arm with the boosted gear. Power seeks power. The stronger you get, the stronger the opponents will be. Great. He mumbled as a red ball formed in his palm. Issei drew his arm back quickly and shot it forward towards the figure still covered in darkness. Dragon shot. The baseball-sized collection of energy expanded once it was let loose. 10 feet wide and 7 feet tall, the red beam shot towards its target. The bright light made Issei squint his eyes and thus missed the figure stepping to the side before vanishing. As the red light faded, Issei saw the destruction that one shot had dealt to the line of fire. A large ditch followed the path, along with trees that had been singed in half or completely blown away, leaving only the roots behind. Holy shit. That attack might not do anything against Old Man Tannan, but it sure as hell is a good landscaping trick. Without the trees or other brush in the way, the moon lit the ground at least a little. The figure that had attacked him was nowhere to be seen. He scanned to the left and right, but saw nothing but the usual forestry. Issei was slowly turning when he caught that cold scent again. This time, it was very close. He spun around quickly and was surprised to see a rather short and well-endowed girl, wearing a costume he recognized from a show that Motohama made him watch. His surprise was all the girl needed to get her shot in. She had a pink wand that was almost as tall as she was, with a gold star in the circle at the top of it, raised above her head. She spun it twice, star-shaped sparkles shooting off, then slammed it to the ground. Celsius cross trigger. The entire clearing was shrouded in a layer of ice that appeared from nowhere. Issei felt it slam against him and cover him up to his elbows. He was trapped. I hate ice. He tried moving any of his limbs, but they wouldn't budge any, and he wasn't sure that even if he boosted, he'd be able to get this thick layer off of him. The girl in the magical girl costume stepped forward, each step making her short pink skirt come dangerously close to revealing what lay underneath as her breasts jiggled side to side. She came within 10 feet of him and puffed her cheeks as she pouted at him. The pink skirt was accompanied by a pink button blouse that exposed her navel, a size too small, thanks to the size of her breasts. He blurted out his thoughts before he could stop himself, his training making the dragon more prevalent in him and the filter for his mouth almost non-existent. I never thought I'd meet a girl cosplaying magical girl Milky Spiral 7 that could actually do magic. He'd slap his hand over his mouth if he could, but the ice certainly prevented that. He noticed the girl in front of him stop mid-step, her somewhat familiar violet eyes widening, before a broad smile came over her. The girl bounced over to him happily, humming a tune he'd never heard. Still the same energetic girl, bless her heart. He heard Elsha whisper. Her happy face turned into a pout once they were nearly face to face. Her puffed cheeks making her look far too innocent to be a girl that had literally frozen him to the ground with seemingly little effort. It was mean of you to attack me. You almost broke my wand. She stepped back and crossed her arms under her chest. What do you have to say for yourself? Dumbfounded by the rapid fire changes she was showing, Issei scrambled for the first logical response he could come up with. You shot first. The girl started tapping her foot, clearly wanting more of an answer than that. Her breasts were once again jiggling from the movement of her leg, and Issei was finding it hard to further explain himself, rather than stare at her. With a face that was almost identical to Sona, a larger and bouncing bust, plus the outfit, his mind couldn't bring up anything other than X-rated thoughts. Could you stop that please? It's really distracting. This week had really done a number on his self-control. With Elsha it seemed fine, because he knew that he couldn't touch her. So that took away part of the urge he might have felt otherwise. But this girl was flesh and blood. Tannan seemed to both fuel and encourage Issei giving in to what the dragon instincts were craving for. The two ideologies had been waging a war this whole week. She stopped. Issei wanted to crawl away from the sad puppy look she sent him. You don't think I'm attractive? Don't say a word. She's playing with you. Elsha spoke aloud, the eye surrounding his sacred gear, making the sound echo up through the ice and straight to his ears. Elsha. You ruined my fun. The girl whined. I think you've had enough fun already, Serafall. I don't think your sister would like getting her pawn back with half of his body covered in frostbite. Dragon or not, ice at absolute zero is dangerous. Serafall shivered as she thought about the glare that Sona would give her. Yes, it is. Came a familiar stoic voice. A blue magic circle appearing just behind Serafall, who had stiffened. The circle flashed and revealed Sona, rubbing the bridge of her nose. She should have expected something like this to happen. Especially given the conversation she just had with her family. They had initially been confused when Sona brought the topic of marriage up herself. And then appalled at the mention of training her pawn to be the one to be her husband. It was only after everything had been laid out that they were even willing to listen to her plans. Sona. I missed you. Serafall launched herself at Sona, grabbing onto her around the neck, nuzzling their cheeks together. You saw me not even an hour ago. Her voice conveyed her annoyance as she tried to pry the amorous Satan off of her. Once Serafall was back on her feet, her happy expression turned serious. She glanced back and forth between her captured opponent and her sister. You're sure this is what you want, Sona? Sona pushed her glasses back into place, having fallen down from her sister's actions. He is the best candidate I've found by far. Sona stepped away from her sister and towards Issei, looking as he had started to shiver. Good evening, Ice. I apologize for not checking on you like I said I would. There were some family issues I had to deal with at the last minute. Issei clenched his teeth, trying to keep himself from displaying just how cold he really was. He missed that this was one of the few times she called him by his nickname. Hi Kaichu. No worries, but if you could get the jailbird over there to let me out, I'd really appreciate it. Both girls looked at him with their mouths agape. Sona couldn't believe what a member of her peerage had just said about one of their leaders, her own sister no less. Serafall, while shocked, was happy with being described in such a way. Most of the underworld had a general idea of how old she was, and a girl likes knowing she's not looking her age, even if she could alter it with magic. You'll have to excuse him. Tannan has been reinforcing the dragon instincts to get better training results. He'll be back to normal a few days after he's back home. It took a few moments before either of the girls moved, and Serafall was the first to recover. She burst out laughing, holding her stomach and trying to remain upright. He'd won the Devil King of Foreign Affairs over. He knew what her outfit was from. 1 month after being reincarnated and he was already at a low-leveled high-class devil's power. And he didn't capable of lying or hiding his true intentions. Yes, he would be a welcome member of her family. Her sister was going to have one powerhouse of a pawn, given enough time. She would make sure that he moved up quickly. What brings you here, Kaichu? Issei ignored his king's relative in favor of finding out why she was here so late at night. Ah, yes. Tannan has been called away for the time being, so your training has been cut short. He sends his regards and offers another training session at the time of your choosing, so long as schedules are in agreement. The large shiver ran over Issei, the cold was really starting to affect him. I see. Kendo bummed it's getting cut short, but I understand he's got more important things to do. Another shiver, this one even larger than the last came. Kaichu, can I get out of here now? This ice is dousing my fire, or I'd do it myself. Sona sent a glare to her sister, who was wiping a tear from her eye, still giggling. Yes, I believe my sister was just about to release you. Sona was not an ice user, but the look she gave Serafall made her minus 460-degree ice seem like a warm summer's day. Beep. On it. Serafall hurried to where her wand was laying on the ground. Once she had it, she waved and the ice shattered from his body. He shook the remnants from his frame. Boost. Transfer. Since the gauntlet was still active, he gave himself a little jumpstart to warm himself up. The quick temperature change made his fingers and toes a little tingly, but he was fine other than that. He made his way over to Serafall, who he had yet to be introduced to. He gave the short woman a bow. As you know, my name is Issei Haidu, Lady Sona Citrus Pawn. Serafall gave the boy a broad smile. Hey there. I'm the Devil King, Serafall Leviathan. Your master is my little sister. Welcome to the family. Issei blanched. He had unknowingly been belittling one of the 4 leaders of the underworld. Kaichu is so gonna be pissed when we get back to Kuo. Gukikuku. Good luck, partner. I think the phrase hell hath no fury like a woman's scorn is rather appropriate here. Well, at least someone found his situation funny. If it wasn't his ass on the line, he probably would too. Ice. We need to be going, and you need to head home right away. The way she spoke made it seem like someone's world was coming to an end. Is there something wrong back home, Kaichu? Sona nodded. She had been surprised to receive a call from the girls that had it well known that, if it weren't for Issei, they'd stay as far away from her and Reya's groups as possible. Your two Kendo friends called me. Apparently there was an altercation with one of the parents. Issei's eyes shot to the top of his brows. Shit. Already I didn't think that was supposed to happen for another few days. He hurried over to his bag, zipped it shut, and made his way back to his king in under 5 seconds. Kaichu, I don't want to interrupt time with your sister. But please, I need to get back and talk to them before they do something stupid. Mrs. Haidu came into the living room, hearing the door open. She had been making a late-night snack for the two girls who were up in her son's room. One of them was a complete wreck, having just had what sounded like a big argument with her parents. And with them, if it involved one, the other was dragged into it as well. It broke her heart to see them so frightened and unsure of what to do. I'm home. She heard the voice of her son just as she came to the kitchen doorway. His appearance surprised her, for multiple reasons. He had a tan, like he'd been out in the sun for the entire time he'd been gone. His shirt and pants looked like he'd run through a maze of razor blades. And he was 2 days early. Ice honey, what happened to your clothes? Issei waved her question off, setting his bag down on the entryway floor. Sorry mom, I'll explain later. Are Yui and Kaori here? Kaichu said that they called her asking for me, but I didn't bring my phone. Nodded with a smile. If Issei hadn't warned her about this possibility a few weeks ago, she would have been worried out of her mind for the two girls. They're in your room. And quite upset. Issei took off towards his room, without another word. Issei ran up the stairs, taking 2 at a time. When he came to the top he heard them whispering to each other. Kara's voice made it apparent that she'd been crying heavily. He walked to his door, opening it slowly, so as to not startle them. The only light inside was the lamp on his desk, giving the room a yellowish glow. Stepping through the doorway, Issei saw the two girls huddled together on his bed, comforting each other. The heads came up, expecting his mother. Kara's eyes lit up once she saw it was him instead. Ice. She yelled, springing from the bed and running into his arms. She buried her head into his chest, her hands pulled in to let herself be enveloped. The sobs renewed once she saw the person she was terrified of leaving behind. He gently wrapped his arms around the brunette. One hand on the center of her back, the other stroking the hair that was for once not held up by her usual red ribbons. What do I do, Ice? He squeezed her body to his, trying to take her worries into himself. Live with me. Both of you. He whispered. Her teary brown eyes snapped up to his. You knew. Issei gave her an apologetic smile as he nodded. I heard when you told Yui. I asked my parents about it, they both agreed. You can live here rent-free for as long as you like. If this were Momo or Reya, he would have expected the reaction. But when Kaori pulled him into a deep kiss, tongue and all, he was unresponsive for more than a few seconds before returning it. Hey. No fair, you two. Addis jumped off the bed to separate her friends. When the two of them pulled away, Kaori refused to let him go, her hands on each side of his face. Her light brown eyes boring into his. I love you, Ice. Pervert, devil, dragon, harem king. I don't care. I need you to be in my life. Issei could only smile as she kissed him again. End of the here. So that's it for today's video guys. Before you go, just like the video and share it with your friends. Bye.